The cabin smelled like pine needles and old wood polish when Claire Whitmore first pushed open the door. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light, streaming through windows that hadn't been cleaned in months, maybe years. For Claire, it was perfect. This isolation was exactly what she needed to finish her article on Ozark folklore. 3 weeks, no distractions, just her laptop in the endless quiet of the Missouri backwoods. She spent that first day settling in. Groceries were unpacked into the ancient, humming refrigerator. She tested the temperamental water heater, which sputtered to life with a groan. Then she took a walk, mapping the winding dirt road that connected the cabin to civilization. A 30-minute drive to the nearest gas station. By evening, she had claimed the place as her own. Her boots were kicked off by the empty fireplace, and herbal tea was steaming in a chipped mug she'd found in the cupboard. This was peace. This was focus. That's when she saw him. Claire had wandered to the kitchen window to rinse her mug, her mind already drifting back to her research notes. And there he was, a man, standing right at the edge of the clearing where the forest began. He was maybe 50 feet away, positioned just beyond the reach of the porch light's soft amber glow. He was completely motionless. In the gathering darkness, she couldn't make out his features, only his silhouette. He seemed to be of average height with a thin build, his arms hanging straight down at his sides. "Hello?" she called out, her voice muffled by the thick window glass. There was no response, nothing. He didn't wave, didn't shift his weight, didn't acknowledge her presence at all. For a moment, her journalist instincts took over, pushing fear to the side. Was he a lost hiker? A curious neighbor checking on the property? She decided to find out. Keeping her eyes locked on the figure, Claire moved toward the front door. She crossed the living room in a few quick strides, her hand reaching for the light switch. She flicked it on, flooding the clearing with a harsh white light. He was gone. She stood on the porch for a full 5 minutes, her heart pounding a steady rhythm against her ribs. She scanned the tree line, listening. The October wind rustled through the oaks and pines, carrying the damp, earthy scent of decay. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted its lonely call. But there was no sign of the man. No sound of retreating footsteps, no snapping twigs, no logical explanation for how someone could vanish so quickly into that dense, dark forest. Just a local, she muttered to herself, trying to force a calm she didn't feel. He was probably more spooked by me than I am of him. But as she went back inside, locking the door and then checking it twice, Claire couldn't shake the image from her mind. There had been something deeply wrong about the way he stood. Too straight, too still, more like a store mannequin than a living, breathing man. And there was something else. In that brief moment before she'd turned away from the kitchen window, just a fleeting glance, she could have sworn his head had been tilted at a completely unnatural angle, as if his neck had been bent too far to one side, broken. She didn't sleep well that night. Every creak of the old cabin settling, every whisper of wind through the eaves, sent a jolt of adrenaline through her. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if he'd come back, or if he'd ever really left at all. What do you think happened to Claire in that cabin? Let me know your theories down in the comments. Have you ever felt like you're being watched? That prickle on the back of your neck, the sudden urge to look over your shoulder? For Claire, that feeling became a terrifying reality. It all started when she rented a secluded cabin, nestled deep in the mountains, a perfect writer's retreat. Or so she thought. The first night she dismissed it, a flicker of movement at the edge of the woods, a tall, slender figure just standing there. Probably just a trick of the light, her tired mind playing games after the long drive. But the second night, the feeling returned, stronger this time. As twilight bled across the sky, she found herself drawn to the windows, her gaze scanning the darkening tree line. And then she saw him. At 9:32 p.m., he was closer, standing by the woodshed, maybe 30 feet away. He stood with an unnatural stillness, his arms hanging straight at his sides. The moonlight caught his pale skin, illuminating a gaunt frame draped in dark clothes. But it was his head that sent a shiver down her spine, tilted at an angle that was just wrong. Like a broken doll, her hand shook as she fumbled for her phone and dialed 911. Deputy Warren sounded patient on the line, promising to send a car. 40 long minutes later, when the headlights finally cut through the darkness, The figure was gone. The deputy, a seasoned woman with kind but skeptical eyes, did a sweep of the property. "No footprints, no sign of anyone but you," she said from the porch. "These woods can play tricks on you. Shadows move funny out here. Maybe get some motion sensor lights." Claire tried to believe her. She wanted to believe her. But that night at 2:15 a.m., a sound jolted her from a restless sleep, a soft scraping noise, like fingernails dragging across wood. It was coming from outside, moving slowly along the cabin wall. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. As if something was testing the structure, looking for a way in. In the pale morning light, her heart sank. There, etched into the kitchen window frame, were 4 parallel scratches, gouged deep into the wood. That was it. She needed proof. That afternoon, Claire drove to town and bought 2 trail cameras. She spent an hour carefully mounting them on trees, hiding them among the dense branches, positioning them to face the cabin from different angles. If this trick of the light came back, she would be ready. She would have a face to show the deputy. That night, she barely slept, waiting for the morning, waiting to see what the cameras had captured. When she finally retrieved the memory cards, her hands were trembling. She plugged the first one into her laptop. The footage began, showing the quiet, empty yard. Then, at 11:03 p.m., he appeared, standing between 2 pine trees, just a silhouette against the dark woods. The second camera caught him at 11:47 p.m., much closer this time, standing silently beside her car. My God, he was real. But it was the footage from 2:13 a.m. that shattered her world. He was right there, at the kitchen window. His face was pressed against the glass, his features distorted and horrifyingly clear. His skin was paper white. His eyes were too wide, too dark, just black voids in the grainy night vision. His mouth was stretched into a ghastly imitation of a smile. And his hands were splayed on the glass, fingers unnaturally long, joints bending at angles that no human skeleton could manage. Just as she was trying to process this impossible sight, the footage dissolved into a screen of screaming static, a chaotic mess of pixels and noise. It lasted for 3 minutes. When the picture returned, he was gone. Claire replayed the clip, again and again. Each time, the horrifying image burned itself deeper into her mind. This wasn't a man. This was something else, something ancient and wrong. A desperate late-night search for the cabin's history unearthed a chilling story from a 1987 newspaper archive. A family had rented this exact cabin for a summer vacation. The father had vanished without a trace. His wife told the police he'd been acting strangely for days before he disappeared, whispering that something in the woods was calling to him, calling his name from between the trees. He walked out one night and was never seen again. They never found his body. Claire stared at the screen, the old news article glowing in the dark room. She thought of the figure at the edge of the woods, of the scratches on the window, of the face pressed against the glass. It wasn't just watching her. It had been here before. And it was getting closer every single night. The woods weren't playing tricks. They were hungry, and they were calling for her. Claire told herself she stayed out of stubbornness. Professional obligation, maybe. Or perhaps it was the non-refundable deposit on the rental cabin. But deep down, the journalist in her knew the truth. This was the story of a lifetime. She just had to survive long enough to write it. The first few nights were unsettling, a flicker of movement at the edge of the woods, a sense of being watched. But the fourth night brought a new kind of horror. The figure no longer lurked in the shadows of the forest. As dusk bled across the sky, Claire found him standing right in the middle of the clearing, a mere 20 feet from her porch. He was so close now. So close she could see his face clearly through the window. In the fading light, he looked almost human, almost. His skin had a waxy, almost translucent quality, like something preserved for far too long. His eyes, impossibly wide, never blinked, their gaze fixed on her, on the cabin windows. And that smile, a terrible, stretched grin that revealed teeth just a little too sharp and far too numerous. Claire went into lockdown mode. Every light in the cabin blazed, Every door was double-bolted, every window latched shut. She clutched a heavy kitchen knife in one hand and her phone in the other, a grim understanding dawning on her that neither would be much help. Deputy Warren hadn't believed her story about a figure in the woods before. She certainly wouldn't believe this. The small-town cop had dismissed it as city folk jitters. Now Claire knew it was something else entirely. Just after midnight, the piercing shriek of her car alarm shattered the silence. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she scrambled to the window. There he was, standing right beside her car, one unnaturally elongated hand resting casually on the hood. Then, as abruptly as it started, the alarm cut off. The sudden silence was somehow more terrifying, and in that silence she heard it, a voice thin and distant like wind whistling through a crack in the wall. It whispered a single word, Claire. It knew her name. How did it know her name? Panic began to set in, cold and sharp. Over the next hour, she discovered his gifts. On her doorstep, she found a collection of dead birds arranged in a perfect, horrifying circle. Their necks were all broken, snapped at the same unnatural angle as his own tilted head. Then she saw the symbols carved into the wood of the porch railing, primitive, unsettling figures that seemed to writhe and squirm in her peripheral vision. The final soul-crushing discovery was under her car's windshield wipers. A stack of old Polaroids. Her breath caught in her throat as she looked at them. They were pictures of the inside of the cabin, pictures taken recently. There was her laptop open on the table, her jacket draped over the back of a chair, and the last one showed her, sleeping in bed, oblivious. He had been inside, while she slept, while she worked, while she barricaded herself behind locked doors, foolishly believing she was safe. He had been in the room with her. That was it. The story wasn't worth this. The realization hit her like a physical blow and she sprang into action. She grabbed her keys, her laptop, and threw her essentials into a bag. The plan was simple. Get in the car, drive through the night, and never ever look back. Let someone else tell this story. Let someone else become a statistic. But when she reached the door, her hand froze on the deadbolt. She looked through the small pane of glass, and she saw them. Not one figure. Dozens. Dozens of them, all identical to the first, forming a silent, waiting semicircle around the cabin. Each one with that same tilted head, that same terrible fixed smile, those same two long fingers hanging limply at their sides. They stood perfectly still, a silent, smiling army in the moonlight. Come out, Claire. The voice was different now. It wasn't a whisper from the woods, it was everywhere. It was inside her head, a vibration that seemed to hum through the very walls of the cabin. We've been so patient. We've waited so long for someone to understand. To join us. To become still. Her mind, already fracturing under the strain, finally pieced it all together. The missing father from 1987 that Deputy Warren had mentioned offhandedly. The local folklore she'd come here to research. Tales of silent watchers in the woods, of people who walked into the trees and returned, changed. They weren't ghosts. They weren't demons. They were something older, something that existed in the quiet spaces between movement and stillness, between the living and the forgotten. They didn't want to hurt her. They wanted to transform her. Her phone buzzed, a jarring modern sound in the primal horror of the moment. A text from an unknown number. Just a few words glowed on the screen. The cabin is the trap. We are the invitation. Choose. Claire looked from the circle of smiling figures outside to the knife in her hand. She had two options. Wait here, trapped, until hunger or madness drove her out into their waiting arms. Or go now on her own terms and face whatever waited for her in those ancient woods. The knife clattered to the floorboards. Her hands were shaking too violently to hold it anymore. Outside, as if on some unseen cue, the figures took a single synchronized step closer. Their smiles widened. Claire never sent her article. 3 weeks later, when the rental company sent someone to check on the cabin, they found it empty. All of her belongings were still there. Her laptop was open on the table. A half-finished cup of tea sat cold on the counter, and her car keys rested where she'd left them. But Claire herself was gone, vanished without a trace. Sometimes hikers in the Ozarks report a strange sighting. They speak of seeing a woman standing perfectly motionless among the trees. She's thin and pale, they say, with her head tilted at an impossible, painful-looking angle. She never moves. She never speaks. She just watches from the shadows with eyes that are too wide and too dark. And she is always, always smiling. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. Stay safe out there, and see you next time.